Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Desi and I'm doing something a little bit different today. And that is a review slash synopsis of the chapters for the first novel in A Song of Ice and Fire, that is A Game of Thrones. And this is the prologue chapter, which ended up taking a lot longer than I expected. I ended up putting in quite a bit of notes for it. But this is just something to keep me sane while I wait for The Winds of Winter to come out, which, knock on wood, it will eventually. I've re-listened to the book probably 3 times. I've read the book once, and I've listened to it in audiobook every night to help me go to sleep. So I figured since I'm already nearing the end of A Dance with Dragons audiobook, that I would just do these chapters individually and just see what happens and see how many views I get and how many people like this content. So it's something that won't take too long, and it's something I actually enjoy doing. So we're going to give it a go. First off, this book was published in 1996 by GRRM, George R. R. Martin, or as I'm just going to be calling him, George going forward for simplicity. He was a relatively unknown writer. He had published novels, he had published books, and he had also worked on TV shows as a writer. So he was up and coming, and this really was his big breakout point. And he really didn't get the wide known fame until the TV show came out. But this book was very much his magnum opus for the time, and it really got him publicity and recognition. This is my second favorite series of all time, behind A Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. And Robert Jordan and George knew each other too, which I thought was very interesting. They're actually friends. He almost gave up writing after he had a really bad horror novel in the 80s. And I'm glad he came back and did this. And he decided to do this because he was tired of getting hamstrung by the TV world, because he had these great ideas and notions, but they had to condense everything for the purpose of TV. So 91, he started writing this book, and he, which he won't do later on in his life, just sat down and pumped it out and got it done. And he has difficulty doing that now, but there's a lot of reasons for that. So just word to the wise, this will contain heavy spoilers. This series has a ton of Easter eggs and subplots that are addressed early on that come up later on. And I want to call those out as they come up, because that's a lot of things. A lot of people miss that in the first read through. And I really want to point that out. And I really want to address them as they pop up. Because even after, this is my third time rereading slash re-listening to the series, and I'm still missing stuff. So if something comes up and I see it as relevant, even if it's 3 books later on, I'm going to point it out. So anyways, the first novel, or the first chapter, the first part of the book, I should say, it's in the haunted forest. There we go. We got the ominous music going on, and let me move the slideshow forward. And it starts out with the Ranger Garrett, or the Man-at-Arms Garrett, saying, "We should start back. It is getting dark. It is cold. It is north of the wall." And we don't know that from the get-go. We just hear, "We should start back." So right off the bat, we know that this group is in some serious danger. And this is a group of Night's Watchmen tracking a raiding band of wildlings, essentially, who had been causing trouble. And there are 3. It is Garrett, who is a seasoned man-at-arms. I think he's like in his 50s. He has a ton of experience. He's a very powerful warrior in his own right. He's crusty and grizzled and a veteran. And we have Will, who is a young ranger and a tracker. He's a former poacher who got sent to the wall, or in lieu of losing a hand. And then we have Waymar Royce, who is an arrogant teenage knight who, I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty happy when he disappears. He's really arrogant and I hate him, but I think you're supposed to. Also, I just hate the system that he is born into. And Royce is just constantly needling Garrett, who is like, "Hey, we need to go back. It's getting dark. It's getting cold. I don't like the look of this woods." And I think this is a pretty good interpretation of the woods. This is a real life picture, obviously, but I think this is a fair interpretation of the haunted forest. It is a deciduous slash pine slash fir forest. So I think I think this might be the Black Forest in Germany. So I think it's a pretty good picture that it paints. And both Will and Garrett, who are veterans of the Night's Watch, are like, this is not good. There is something seriously wrong. And they just want to go back to the wall in safety. And Waymar Royce is like, no, I need to finish this task that I've been assigned to. He's been given the lead of it. And he is completely unwilling to heed any sort of caution. And he is heedless to obvious signs that this is a bad idea. Because he just thinks the other two are cowards and doesn't want to listen to them. Because also, they're cowards and they're beneath him in station. They're just peasants or whatever to him. So he's just like, I need to get this ranging done so I can get prestige. And this very much reminds me of a failed D&D group. Where you have, I guess, a DM that kind of has his hands off, or maybe just wants the really arrogant player to die because he's pissing him off, and they're walking into a deadly encounter, and then you have the seasoned, or you have the veteran D&D players like, hey, buddy, what are you doing? This is obviously a situation we're not going to be able to win. You're gonna wipe the group, and he's advising caution, and then the Waymar's kind of like the young paladin who is just played for the first or second or third time playing. He's completely oblivious to the fact that this is an encounter they can't win, and he's like, "Oh, we got this. This is easy. Stop being a coward. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna use my guiding bolts or whatever, and it'll be fine." And he's trying to, maybe there's a girl at the table too. He's trying to impress. I've seen that happen before as a D&D player. And then of course we have the third, who is the timid ranger. I don't know why the rangers always end up the timid ones. But it happened in one of my D&D games too. The guy I was playing with was super timid. He's a friend of mine, but he was just a really quiet, reserved guy. And he tried to caution people, like, "Hey, I rolled really good perception. There's some sketchy stuff up ahead," and nobody listens to him. So, just thought I'd throw that in there. I swear, like, George got his inspiration from a failed D&D group on this. It's kind of funny. And Waymar really has no right to be in command. Waymar Royce is the knight. But right off the bat, we're reminded this is a feudal society, and that you don't have to have merit to get these commands. Like, Garrett should be the one in control, or in charge of this group. And he listens to Will, and he trusts Will, and they have a good camaraderie, those two, and they both kind of despise Waymar. And Waymar's just contemptuous. He doesn't care. He's a lordling. He's a knight. These peasants don't know what they're doing, and they're beneath him. And I really hate this. And also, Waymar's like in chainmail. He's got a castle-forged sword. He's got like this really warm cloak, and he's on a war horse, which is completely unsuited to a woods like this. He's just making a ton of noise, and he's just an arrogant kind of douchebag. I think that's a YouTube. I think that's a YouTube safe word. But yeah, Garrett actually secretly despises Waymar, makes fun of him in his cups, and that's why it's really difficult for him to follow this guy, because he has absolutely no respect for him. And Waymar doesn't deserve any respect, to be honest. He didn't inherit this position through anything of his own. He's only 6 months on the watch, and he's got command of this ranging, which is absolutely stupid. Who put him in charge? It was probably, I think it comes up later, but Mormont puts him in charge to make his dad happy, essentially, who is Bronzion Royce or whatever. I won't get too far into that. It comes up later, and we'll address it then. So, they come up to the group of wildlings. Or I should say, I'm skipping ahead. Will tells Waymar that the group of wildlings that they're following is dead. He found their camp, and they're just like sprawled out all over. There's no fire, and they're just lying around. It's like they'd frozen to death. And that's what Garrett suspects. And it is twilight at this time, as I pointed out. It's getting dark. It is cold, and it's getting colder. And Garrett talks about what it's like to freeze to death, since he suspects the wildlings froze to death. And it's really interesting how he goes into this. This is one of the monologues in the chapter, is Garrett describing what it's like to, like, be cold and not being able to get warm and just trying to fight the cold and fight it because it gets inside of you is the way he describes it. You can't get it out unless you like sit by a fire for a long time or whatever. And Waymar's just completely like just rolling his eyes and being an arrogant, you know what. And Garrett pulls back his hood and shows that he has 2 ears that are gone from frostbite, and he lost a pinky finger and lost 2 of his toes. And Waymar, of course, is just like, hey, you should just dress more warmly. He's just completely unconcerned, completely disregarding him, not listening to somebody who's like 3 times his age and like 10 times as tough. And Waymar's just, I hate Waymar so much. Like, and also this comes up later on, Garrett describing what it's like to freeze to death. Because he describes basically as eventually you stop fighting it, it gets inside you can't get it out, and you eventually just go to sleep. And he describes one of his brothers as like freezing to death with a smile on his face, how it's actually peaceful. It's actually one of the better ways to pass on to the next world or whatever. Try not to use words that are going to get me flagged on YouTube or whatever. And Waymar just remains unconvinced because, and he actually has a good reason why he's unconvinced. He says, hey, Will, did you take any watches on the wall lately? And was like, yeah, I take them all the time. He's like, well, what was the wall doing? He's like, well, it's like the wall was weeping. And the wall is made of ice. Spoilers. Like I said, I can't, in order for me to contextualize a lot of this, I have to do spoilers. So please forgive me. And this, I think, is really confusing for people who first read the book. Is like, what are they talking about? Like, what does it mean the wall is weeping? What is Castle Black? What is all this stuff? What is Mormont? Who's Mormont? You know, what is a lordling? That sort of thing. So, Waymar wants to see the wildlings for himself because he doesn't believe they froze to death because the wall's weeping and the wall's made of ice, and that means it was above freezing. The wall is an ice structure. And when it's above freezing, the very outer facade turns to water and it drips. And that's why it's called weeping, so to speak. And I really love the way, as they're moving further into the woods, George describes twilight. He describes, I believe the sky is like turning like a bruised purple like a bruise. And he describes the moon coming up and like the cold crispiness and the quietness of the forest, and every now and like a wolf howling. Really ambient. And this is one of my favorite chapters to go to sleep to at times, even though it's like it ends like super horrifying. The way, first of all, I'm a huge fan of like these cold winter woods. I go hiking all the time here in the Pacific Northwest, and it's like one of my favorite things to do is go hiking in the woods in the wintertime, especially when it's snowing too. It's just so quiet and peaceful. And George does a really good job at setting the tone and the ambiance. So props to him for that. As they go further in the woods, Will and Garrett are continually like, hey, we need to go. This is bad. Like, there's something seriously wrong here. And Waymar's just completely oblivious. He's like crashing through the woods in his warhorse and just doesn't give a damn. And as they approach the area the wildlings were, Will's like, or Garrett's like, hey, we need to start a fire. It's super cold. It keeps getting colder. This is really unnatural. There's something seriously wrong here. Waymar's like, can you just shut up? I'm so tired of hearing you being afraid. Stop being... What unmans you so much? Like, he almost calls him a coward. And it gets so bad that Garrett, like, Will's worried that Garrett's going to pull his sword out and, like, fight Sir Waymar. And this is interesting because Waymar's like half a foot taller, and he's trained at a castle, and Garrett's just like this short, grizzled old man with this little stumpy notched sword. And Will's like, well, yeah, this will be over in 5 seconds, and not because Waymar's gonna win, but because Garrett, because of his experience and skill at arms, is just gonna easily overpower and kill the young lordling. Which is really interesting, by the way, because George describes the knight as being like in the best armor, the best quality, steel, everything. But yet you have this old man who is just going to completely own him. So I love that detail. There's so many little details that George throws in. I try to pick up on all of them. So As they approach the wildling camp, Will notices that the wildlings are gone, and this completely freaks him out. He's like, they were dead. I have no doubt. And of course, Waymar's like, oh, shut up. I can't abide this anymore. I'm so tired of this crap. Like, I'm not going back until we find these wildlings. I am not going to be a failure. Climb that tree, find fire, and shut up. It's just Waymar's just is not having it anymore. He is done. He's so tired of this, and he just is like, okay, I'm finishing this. This is prestige. This is honor. I'm not going to be laughed at, even though they laugh at him anyway, because he's an arrogant douche. But anyways, this is where we get into the spicy part, so to speak. As Will climbs the tree, he notices that the temperature all of a sudden just drops precipitously. And it's not snowy like this in this graphic, by the way. It's just cold and muddy. There's no snow. So I want to point that out. It's like there's little bits of flurries and everything, but it's not like this half a foot or foot of snow on the ground. It's just as these figures, or this one figure approaches out of the woods. I'm not sure if this is the Night King or not, but he's described as a tall, graceful, pale figure with translucent, really beautiful, shining armor. Very supernatural, eerie sort, and just pale skin. He approaches Waymar, and Waymar's like, finally is like, actually loses his confidence and arrogance. His voice cracks as he challenges, like, who goes there? Or who goes there? His voice just cracks. He's completely freaked out, which is kind of amusing to me, because his false bravado is gone. He just sounds like a boy. He's only 18. He's just a teenager. I had issues when I was 18. So it's hard to remember what it's like to be 18. But then it's like you see something like this pale white figure emerging from the woods in this armor and with this magical glitter crystalline sword, and he just completely melts, so to speak. His courage just poof is gone. And it's interesting the way George describes the others, because this is our first, and I think really only in-depth description of it, describing their armor in detail, describing like their eyes as ice blue and burning, which is kind of an oxymoron, because how can you have icy and burning at the same time? It really just emphasizes the supernaturalness of the others here. And yeah, like I said, this is probably the best description of them in the books. And Waymar is soon surrounded by other figures that slowly emerge. I think this graphic does a really good job, by the way, of like they're you don't even hear them, by the way. They're completely quiet. They don't crunch leaves or anything else like that. They're just like ghosts, super creepy and ominous. And it is probably like it's gone from 30 degrees below freezing or whatever to like 10 degrees. It's just frigid cold. Everything is frozen solid. So these others actually impact the weather around them, and note that going forward, by the way. And by the way, this is summertime in the books, so this is a summer night, and all of a sudden it's 10 degrees. Like, there's so many ways George describes these others that just shows how supernatural they are, and also like how supernaturally quick and agile and strong they are, because Waymar challenges the other, says, okay, dance with me. And the other just looks at him with contempt, like not even bothered, and like looks at his sword. And Waymar pulls out his sword, and they start sword fighting, or they start dancing, or whatever you want to call it. And it does not go well for Sir Waymar. He initially, I think the other's just playing with him. In fact, I know he is, because Waymar just is like throwing blows and is swinging as fast as he can. The other is like almost lazily just kind of testing him to see how good he is. And eventually the other is just like, okay, I'm bored now, and just starts driving Waymar back easily, almost lazily. And he actually cuts Waymar because his parry's too slow, and just slices through his chainmail like light leather or cracked leather or whatever you want to call it. So it talks about the other sword. Let me just look it up. A glowing crystal sword. And Will says that I think this is a really good graphic too of the sword that the other carries. think this is a really good picture of the others too, with like you can see the shininess of the sword and the armor and everything else. So it's a really good description, or a really good picture. Yeah, and the other is just inhumanly strong and fast. Waymar really doesn't have a choice, and Will is supposed to like call out to let Garrett know, and Will just is petrified because like this is terrifying. So the Garrett knows what the others are because he's heard tales, and Will's only heard rumors. So this is Will's time ever seeing them, and he's not like, he's a poacher. He's a timid hunter, and like his personality is very timid, and George makes a point of showing that. He never really challenges Waymar like Garrett does. He just does what he's told, and he's really good at tracking because he's a poacher, but he's not a fighter. And he's just like crying and like holding on to his tree that he's using to scout. And, you know, Will knows that he should call out and try to save Waymar, but probably for a couple reasons he doesn't. One, because he's not the bravest individual, and two, he just probably doesn't like Waymar. He doesn't care if he dies. So that's a little bit of speculation on my part. But like I said, I don't have the highest opinion of Waymar. I'm kind of glad he's going to die here, to be honest. That sounds messed up. I'm sorry. But, like, if you're arrogant, he should have never been in charge of this ranging. And unfortunately, he's going to pay the price, and pay the price for one of his soldiers, too. Or two of them, actually. His whole group is at fault because of him. Or he's at fault because of his... Or he's causing his whole group to go into demise. So Waymar gets injured, and he shouts for Robert, which again is another Easter egg. We don't know who Robert is, but we'll find out soon enough. And he swings his steel sword as hard as he can at the other, and the other just casually, just almost contemptuously bats it away. And Waymar's steel sword shatters into 100 pieces, and like a huge chunk of it goes into his eye. And he's like screaming, covering his face, and the others just converge around him and finish him off. And it's super gruesome, and it is what it is. So after the danger has passed, or that Will thinks it's passed, he goes and picks up the shattered sword to bring it back to Castle Black to let the others know. And as he's getting up to take the sword back, Waymar Royce is standing behind him. And yes, he's this tall. He's well over 6 foot, and Will's like maybe 5'5". So it's this huge, imposing figure. And like he's got this piece of sword still stuck in his eye. Again, this is a really good graphic. I love the artwork in the books, by the way. That's part of the inspiration why I'm doing this. And Will is just petrified again, because like I said, not the bravest individual, and to see like a clearly dead man standing is just absolutely terrifying. And he's got one eye that's ruined and one eye that's blue, very much like the others, just described as bright blue, and that it saw, and it likely remembered, because it is mentioned that whites do remember, and Waymar Royce has become a white. Spoiler, like I said, spoilers incoming. And he takes his long, elegant hands in doeskin gloves, or moleskin gloves, and strangles Will with cold, dead hands. Cold hands. Remember that one too, because that's going to come up later. Cold hands. And that is verbatim what George used. And that is how the chapter ends, or the prologue ends. And I think this is a very good prologue, because we're introduced to the ultimate enemy of the book straight up. And the ultimate enemy, the others, is described in very strong detail. We now know what an other looks like. We know how strong they are. We know how quiet and graceful they are, and how deadly they are. So overall, just a great prologue. Not my favorite prologue, but a good prologue to set the tone for the rest of the book. It's also very long compared to the other chapters. I think the chapters are like, if you're reading them, they're like 10 to 15 minutes. Or if you're doing audiobooks, like 10 to 15 minutes. This one was like 25 minutes. So the others won't be as long. But yeah. I hope you all enjoyed. And like and subscribe and drop a comment if you want me to do more of these. I'm kind of going unedited to see how it goes. I'm trying to work on my speaking skills, so I'm trying not to do too much editing in between and just go off the cuff. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.